Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules today to join us. My name is Steve Philp, and I'm your host today from Portugal Pathways. And it is my pleasure to guide you through today's panel discussion, which is focused on a new report out today about wealthy expats in Portugal. We'll be focusing on that along with updates on the NHR tax regime in Portugal and how it impacts on those applying for it before the deadline in December. Now, as you may already know, Portugal has been attracting a large number of international investors and affluent expats in recent years. This has been amplified by the recent government announcement to end NHR tax regime for new entrants after December the 31st this year. Over the course of the next 45 minutes, you will have the opportunity to gain valuable insight from our panel of experts who have decades of experience in this field, along with decades of experience in private wealth management. You will also hear about the key findings from today's Wealthy Expats in Portugal Survey Report 2023. The company behind the report, WDF Research, have based this report on interviews with over 1,000 wealthy expats about their motivations, likes and dislikes, as well as understanding more what brings them to Portugal for a new life or obviously investment opportunities. Now, we're joined, as I said, by an esteemed panel today. This includes Paul Stannard. Paul is the non-exec chairman at WDF Research and is an international entrepreneur, tech and investment expert, and we'll hear more from Paul in a minute. Joining Paul are Chris Marsden. Chris is the CEO at RTI Family Office. Chris has over 30 years of experience working with wealthy families and individuals on their all-round wealth preservation and intergenerational wealth transfer. He works with a significant family with private wealth to plan and manage their assets and lifestyles. Alongside Chris, we have Ricardo Chavez. Ricardo is the owner of All Finance Matters, specializing in international tax advice, and he is based in Portugal. He has also built up a significant reputation in supporting affluent expats in navigating NHR tax regime. And finally, we have David Vicani. David is chairman of the Federation of European Independent Financial Advisors and the owner of Beacon Global Wealth Management, based in Portugal. David is an expert in advising affluent expats and high net worth families structuring their wealth and investments. He has decades of experience as an expert in international cross-border investment planning and wealth management. Just to let you guys know, today's webinar is being recorded and will be available on Portugal Pathways YouTube channel and the website later today. The Wealthy Expats in Portugal Survey Report will be sent to all registrants after the webinar and can also be accessed in the media on Portugal Pathways website later today. And finally, obviously, we would really like to encourage all of you guys within the audience to obviously populate the chat with questions, as we'll be addressing as many of these questions as we can after the presentation today. Now let's hear about Chris, about his experiences working with high net worth individuals and families, some of whom
Good morning, everybody. Hope you're all well, Chris. And I hope you can hear me. I work with, that's great. I've worked with wealthy families and wealthy expats for over 30 years. My experience in the last 10 years has been working in the family office arena, which involves working with wealthy families and planning where they live, how they live, looking after their lifestyles, and making sure that we take care of all of the issues that they have. And that works from investment to finding houses to making sure that their children are in the right schools, that the houses that they have in various jurisdictions have staff. So my background is very much working with wealthy people in the affluent space. Portugal is a country that has come up on the radar in the last probably 12 to 15 years as a country where wealthy people are looking to purchase property and settle down and build a life. And this sometimes comes from what I would call the principal of the family office, which is the main person. But after that, it's also children, and it's a great place for families to have holiday homes, and then from holiday homes they become residents because of the great lifestyle benefits and the visa benefits that they can get there. I hope that covers everything. Yeah.
Right. Thank you for that, Chris. Next, I'm going to ask David. That's great. Thank you, Chris. Next, we have David Carney. David, you have a dual role and wear two hats. Please sort of talk to us about your experience working within Portugal with wealthy families and obviously navigating the NHR tax regime and structuring income and finance for the long-term gain.
Thanks, Stephen, and good morning, everybody. And thank you for joining this. Just to say, I live in Portugal. I did the NHR route myself about 3.5 years ago. Basically, the whole process really is about planning and organizing yourselves. Portugal is a wonderful country, great climate, wonderful people. And the whole idea really is that you should just get yourself organized and organized in a way that works best for you in Portugal and works obviously for the Portuguese economy as well. I've worked, as I say, I live and work here in Portugal now, working with families with in significant investments and pension funds, property interests, and business interests as well, which is increasingly relevant. And we work with a group of many professionals like Ricardo here to assist individuals and families sort of relocating and who are relocated in Portugal. So a lot of it is NHR, 10 years, wonderful, and obviously that's about to change, and we'll be talking about that later. But the main thing is to help people organize and structure themselves for the long term. It would be a great shame if after 10 years of living in a wonderful country, people had to up sticks and go somewhere else. So the whole exercise is really organizing and assisting people in their long-term plans for their wealth, and significantly also for the succession and inheritances for their families.
Brilliant. Well, thanks for that, David. We'll hear more from you a bit later. Ricardo, over to you. Please tell us a little bit about yourself and all finance matters.
Okay, my name is Ricardo. I'm Portuguese. I'm a certified accountant for over 25 years. We set up a company just over 10 years ago, which basically where we give advice, tax advice and accountancy services, mostly for expats. We have a vast experience with the NHR, but not only with the NHR. We have a team of over 35 people, most of them fluent in English and French. And basically, we look after most of the foreign clients that come here and they need someone to guide them through the tax system. They don't understand the language, they don't understand how the tax system works. And we give them that support so that they can relax and enjoy Portugal.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for that, Ricardo. I can see already that we're getting lots of questions in the chat. As I said, we'll come to those after a presentation from Paul. Just before Paul makes a presentation, I just need to load your slides, Paul, so bear with me 2 seconds. Here we go. Can you see those, Paul?
Thank you. So just to give you some background, so today we are publishing, and it'll be sent out in the media later today, this independent report on wealthy expats in Portugal. But the survey is based on 1,000 respondents, some of which are not actually in Portugal yet. They're considering many different locations. It could be Panama, Dubai, France, Portugal. But we included those in the survey as well. And obviously people that are planning to move to Portugal and people that are already there in situ and enjoying the benefits of an affluent life in Portugal. And the first thing that obviously the survey, when we was in the middle of the survey, obviously we had the news about NHR. So the dynamic and questions and some of the feedback that came from that, which are in the report, I'm sure will be very useful to everybody on this webinar, and will be available after the event. I'm sure Steve will be telling you how you can access it. Everybody who registered will be sent a full copy of the report. But I'm just going to deal with some of the highlights rather than death by PowerPoint. So one of the main stats was that basically 79% of all people that actually were interviewed said that security and safety was a big part of what was driving why they were coming. And a similar stat, 79% said that they would come regardless of what would happen with changes in NHR and what will replace it. So that's quite important, I think, because it highlights the appeal of Portugal goes way beyond just its tax incentives, and is an indication, and I'm sure Ricardo and some of the legal people that we work with will back that up, because the last week or two just shows how determined people are to actually find their life and start enjoying the benefits in Portugal. But the other thing was living like a local. Many people that actually come there, you really do need to embrace the culture, the country, the people. Obviously, there are expat communities in all over Portugal, Lisbon, Porto, the Algarve, and a lot of the places along the Silver Coast and south of Lisbon and surrounding. But 73% of people said they wish they'd integrated more in relation to the culture, the lifestyle, the people, and then obviously, as well as enjoying the climate, the environment, and the favourable tax and investment offerings that are available. The other thing was that obviously Portugal's property market has been talked a lot about in the last year or two, since the Golden Visa program, where you can't now invest directly in property to get the Golden Visa. You can still get a Golden Visa, but there are other ways to do that. But the property market, a piece of research was only out a couple of weeks ago. Portugal's property market is thriving, partly because for every 10 properties sold, there's only one built, which has a big impact on supply and demand. And right across Portugal in 2023, property prices on average are growing at about 6.8%, which is higher than most of the major real estate markets around the world. And in certain locations in the Algarve and in and around Lisbon, it's as high as 15%. And our research, based on the feedback, is that it's still going to be a strong market for property. But the big thing that I think is driving a lot of people, especially around private wealth, is safety and security, as well as health and well-being. Because you can have all the money in the world, but if you don't have safety and security and can stay healthy with your wealth, then it doesn't add up to much. And we was in the States only 10 days ago, and there was a lot of families there in private wealth that are a little bit uncertain about the future. There's a lot going on in the world, and we've had a lot of people feeding in from places like the US, UK, with the political situation changing, around Europe, and other places like Hong Kong, and more recently, obviously, what's going on in Israel. There are a lot of people looking for a safe and secure, as well as friendly place. So next slide. One of the biggest stats, though, which sort of leads into what David touched on briefly, was about planning for the long term. Because a lot of people come to Portugal, they have a foot in or a foot out, or they then go through the visa process and become a tax domicile. But even when they become a tax domicile under NHR, many of them don't structure their tax and financial planning for the long term. And quite a few people have said, in fact, only 27% of all the people that are in Portugal said that they'd actually structured their tax and financials for the long term, not just during the NHR tax status period. And I think that's quite significant, because obviously progressive tax rates around the world and in Portugal after those 10 years can be quite significant, 28 to 48%. And it's really important that you talk to people like Ricardo and David and plan that tax advice and get that structure right. Next slide. And finally, some of the other key points that came out of the analysis were around people's likes and dislikes. And one of the major things people do like is obviously the friendliness. I mean, it's in the top 5 places according to our research in terms of the happiness score. But people do have certain things that do frustrate, and there's the bureaucracy. There's a little bit of bureaucracy that goes on in Portugal that you have to get used to. The language can be a bit more challenging than certain other languages, but the likes in terms of the culture, the heritage, the food, the cost of living, as well as the natural beauty of Portugal, makes it a fantastic place to build a life. And then when you take 300 days plus of sunshine and a temperate winter environment, then, you know, all of these things are major drivers for why people come. In fact, 91% of people interviewed said they were coming for climate, lifestyle, culture, safety, security, healthcare, and the friendliness over the tax incentives that are on offer. And that compares very favorably with other locations, relocation areas like Spain, Dubai, Panama, Costa Rica, and came up 3rd out of 50 countries as a place to migrate to. And it's also number 1 for relocation and voted number 1 for relocation and retirement. So I think Portugal will continue on that path, and having access to the whole of the European Union Schengen area, that freedom of movement is never been more precious to many people. And they're the key highlights from the report. But as I say, this will be shared with everyone afterwards. Yes, sure. So obviously there were some discussions and feedback about the NHR tax regime and what it offers. And a lot depends, you know, a lot of feedback we had is, well, how does it work for me? How does it work for me? I'm from the US, or I'm from Israel, or I'm from Hong Kong. But it is all very much, and I lead this to the professional advisors, from our understanding, it's really down to people's personal circumstances. And in circumstances, I believe whatever replace it will still offer an attractive route into Portugal. But there are draft information being published about what will replace NHR. The draft name is the Incentivized Tax Scheme, ITS for short. But with all of these things, you've got to embrace it and act like you're Portuguese in your process and in your dealings and in your activity, and then you can structure and plan and tax plan for a good life in Portugal. They're the main summary points from the Wealthy Expats report that we're publishing today.
That's great, Paul. I mean, there were some really enlightening and amazing statistics within there. I think that's really resonated with the audience. I'm just going to stop that sharing, and we're going to get stuck into some of these questions. But before we go to the audience question, I think one of the statistics that really jumped out at me was that only 27% of wealthy expats had structured their finances beyond the initial 10-year of the NHR. And I really wanted to get some feedback from the panel as to why they thought that this number was maybe low, on the low side. I'll start with you, David. What are your thoughts around that particular sort of statistic that's come from the report?
I think people, it's often, it's a big step moving. It's a really big step moving to a different country. It's often born out of spending, many family holidays or somewhere or something like that. So I think the figures generally are a little bit lower than you would anticipate. There were a lot of people doing this from other countries in Europe because it was easy to get to Portugal. But I think the main thing is it needs to be embraced fully. And actually, when you have people working and then, picking up children from, taking people out of school, taking people from, it is a big thing. And it's a really big decision. I could see very much why people of a certain, certain age, where over the last few years where they were in receipt of retirement benefits. A lot of the people we meet have been people that have been global in their travel. And by that, I mean, they worked internationally, they've traveled the world and the like. So it's that to continue to be, should we say, outside of their original place of birth is not a big thing. But I just think moving is a big thing, and it needs to be done for all the right reason, and tax isn't just the main reason for it.
Ricardo, anything to add to what David said with regards to that particular statistic? You're on mute, Ricardo.
Sorry. Like David has mentioned, I mean, it's a big thing to move to a different country, but providing you have the professionals that can guide you and that can explain what are the tax implications, that will help. And as long as you plan ahead, I've met with many different people over the last years that were planning to come to Portugal. Even when we heard about the news on the NHR, there were people that immediately said, listen, my plans were to move in 2 or 3 years. And if the NHR is not available, we will still move. We will just have to make different arrangements. But the main driving force for anyone to move to Portugal is not, or it should not be, the tax. It needs to be to do with your lifestyle. And then the tax is one of the elements, but it shouldn't be the one that is the driving force.
Absolutely. I think, as Paul alluded to, 91% of people interviewed said that it was the climate, the lifestyle, the culture, and they that were indeed the main driving factors over and above the the incentives, obviously the NHR and offered. Now we're getting inundated with questions. Obviously, it's a very timely topic. And I'll get straight into those questions. We had a couple of questions that were posed at the time of registration. We had a question from Colin. So Colin is an EU citizen. He's actually living in Israel. So our thoughts are with Colin and obviously his fellow nationals. And he's considering moving to Portugal in the next few weeks. He's asking, is he able to apply for an NHR status, as he's assuming that his EU status is fine? And what other steps does he need to take, and by when? and I'll put that one to Ricardo initially.
Okay, I'm going to first make an introduction just to explain. So what's happening is that the Portuguese government has filed the state budget proposal, which is going to be voted at the end of this month. And on their proposal, which it's very likely it's going to be approved, they propose to terminate as of January 1st, 2024, the NHR. Okay, so those that already have the NHR in the past will not be affected. The ones that still want to apply for the NHR, they need to be residents before the end of this year. Okay, so if they are residents before 31st December 2023, we will be able to make their process and submit the process before the 31st of March 2024, which is the normal deadline. So anyone becoming resident in 1 year, the NHR process can be submitted up to the end of March of the following year. So if he's a EU citizen, what he needs to do, for him, it's very easy to get a residency permit. He needs to have an address in Portugal. So either a rental contract or own a property in Portugal. He needs to have a fiscal number. So if he doesn't have a fiscal number yet, that's the first step to do, is to get the fiscal number. And then with the fiscal number, the ID, and that rental contract or property deed, in case he buys a property, he goes to the local council and he gets what we call the CRUI, which is the EU residence certificate. If that EU residence certificate is issued before the end of this year, so before the 31st of December 2023, it's then possible to change the tax residency with effect to 2023 and apply for the NHR before the 31st of March. The problem is those that are not EU citizens. Okay, I know that in the audience there's a lot of people that are not EU. If you are not EU and if you don't have the residency permit or your SEF appointment in Portugal before the end of 2023, at the moment there's no assurances that you will be able to get the NHR on time. Okay. The government, there are some news on the press that there's a lot of pressure for the government to extend or make some sort of extension on the deadlines for people that already at the first appointment, for instance, in the US or in the UK, and are waiting for the appointment with SEF. But there's nothing yet on the law that allows us to say that it's going to be possible. So the ones that I can assure that it's possible and that there won't be any problems to get the NHR is those that have a residency permit issued before the end of this year. Okay.
And just expand on that point, because Louise has asked in the chat specifically around obviously residency agreement, that is a 6-month rental agreement sufficient, or does it have to be a 12-month agreement?
No, 6 months is sufficient.
Excellent. Okay, cool. That's good. So it said, obviously the questions are absolutely flooding in. I've got one here that was sent in by Bob Stevens Jr. So Bob is in the States, and I'm going to put this one to Chris. So Bob runs a family office in the US, Chris, and obviously the IRS and the SEC have strict rules on citizens originally from the US. So he's sort of saying that he's committed to Portugal. What kind of visa should he be looking at? He's committed because of the heritage, the lifestyle, exactly what Paul pointed out in that 91% statistic. There's the sort of tax benefits are secondary to Bob. So his question is in terms of what visa should he be looking at, Chris?
Well, that's an interesting question, actually, because Americans always have that issue of being US connected persons. So they will pay tax back to the US wherever they're based in the world. So this really won't be a tax driven decision. This will very much be a lifestyle, a decision maybe to move away from the US. We've we've seen in the past that when politics changes in the US, some people tend to make more of a decision to leave. So the visas they would look at, I think, would either be a golden visa or a D7 visa. That's kind of the visas we look at. We have looked at for the men of our family, and the difference between them is really one of them will allow you to travel around the EU and be an EU visa, and one of them is much more of a Portuguese visa. But these are very much, without knowing the full background to the situation and where it is, it's difficult to say straight away. But we certainly work with lawyers and people that will be able to make that recommendation for them. The other thing I would suggest is for wealthy people and Americans and the like is Portugal's a great place for bringing up children, for grandchildren to be around. So that generally is a big driver that we've seen for it. And also, there are benefits around succession planning, generational planning, which is a big driver for wealthy people. How can we move money down the generations without losing too much of it in taxation and that type of area? So, and those are all things that we find, certainly within the family that I look after, and in my experience, people are really very, very focused on. So, I think as Ricardo said, and David said as well, don't let tax be your driver. Portugal's a beautiful, people love it, but it's always nice to have a good tax reason to be there, but that shouldn't be your main reason. Does that answer the question, Steve?
That does, yeah, very succinctly. Thank you, Chris. Again, as I said, the chat is exploding. The questions. We've got lots and lots of questions. You mentioned obviously the D7 visa, Chris. I'm going to ask, I think, David to comment on this particular one. This is from Gregory. Let me just get it. Oh, it's disappeared. Give me 2 seconds. I think Gregory was asking, he's coming from the UK. Does his D7 visa need to be finalised before he can secure a residency permit?
I actually think that's probably a Ricardo question, actually. Probably
Ricardo, yeah,
first instance,
right, yeah.
and then I'll jump on the back of that.
Yeah, please. Could you repeat the question, please?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So this is from Gregory. He's saying that he's coming from the UK, and he's asking, does his D7 visa need to be finalised before he can secure a residency permit?
Okay. So if you start and have an initial appointment with the visa people in the UK, that evidence is not enough to make you a tax resident. You need to have an appointment with CEF in Portugal, and only at that stage we will be able to give you to change your tax status. And that's the question that we even yesterday checked with the tax authorities. We have people that already have that appointment in Portugal with CEF, even that they don't have the residency card issued yet. We were able to change their tax status, and they are now a tax resident, even without the card, but they already had the appointment with CEF, and they know that they will be granted residency. But we had another client that had an appointment with VSF in the States. He was agreed to come to Portugal, but he's waiting for CEF. And that evidence that VSF already told them that they can come to Portugal is not enough for the Portuguese tax authorities to allow him to be resident. So if he doesn't meet with CEF before the end of the year, it's unlikely that he's going to become tax resident in time to have the NHR. And that's what I was mentioning before. We hope that the government will create some sort of special schedule for those that already had their appointment in the US or in the UK and are just waiting on CEF. And that was already on the news. But at the moment, there's nothing in writing that I can tell you to don't worry, because the only thing that we can do is to hope that common sense prevails and that it will be possible for those people to still apply. Okay, I had can I just answer a few other questions that I saw here in relation to this?
Absolutely.
There's people asking if they move immediately, if they will be taxed the whole year. The answer is no. In Portugal, there is a split tier treatment, so you are taxed from the moment that you become a resident. Okay, so and also there are double tax agreements in place. Portugal has over 70 double tax agreements in place, and if you are working in the UK, for instance, and you become a tax resident here, you're not going to pay tax on both countries. So first of all, you need to see if the residency tests, the HMRC allows you to not be taxed there. But the fact that you are taxed resident here doesn't automatically exonerate you from tax there. And on the contrary, the fact that you are still a tax resident, it will mean that in Portugal, Portugal has no rights to tax you some of those incomes. And specifically in this case, I think the question was salary. So the NHR, as long as it's taxed in the country of source, in Portugal, you won't be taxed. Okay. There's all sorts of questions here. There's people saying, well, if you go from 10% to 48%, it's a very high jump. Well, it's not going to be necessarily 48%, because in Portugal, the tax works, the progressive tax rates are work on tax bands. So the first band is 14.5, then you have one band for 21, and it goes on up to 48. So even on the highest band, you get taxed on an average of 37%. So it's not even 48. Obviously, 37, it's a lot more than 10%. I agree. But for instance, if you are a US citizen, and US citizens, they know that they normally continue paying tax in the US, some of these tax will be credit on your US tax return. So when you file for taxes in the US, you will be able to inform the IRS how much of that tax you've paid in Portugal, and get some of that credit on your US tax return.
Brilliant.
I mean,
Thank
I
you
don't
for that,
know
Ricardo.
which other questions I can answer.
I think we're the chat is obviously blown up, and I will say to everyone putting questions in, we will obviously try and answer as many as we can in the next sort of 20 minutes. If we don't get round to those questions, we will try and get back to you guys. Obviously, you're more than welcome to contact us via our website. I think Joe will put up the website address in a minute, and you're able to contact us to speak to any of the experts who are currently on this panel.
I think, Steve, can I just jump in on the back of Ricardo there, because it said there's lots and lots of questions on there, which I'm sure we can pick up on, I hope. I don't want to sort of ignore any of them. A few of the questions on there are very much about someone, shall we say, people, and so apologies if this is not specific to any particular question, but I'm just trying to been reading the summaries here of the questions. And Ricardo would confirm this. Once you become NHR, or you already are NHR, or you're resident in Portugal, shall we say, there are a number of very sensible and tax compliant ways to manage your affairs and manage your investment planning, your succession planning, something that Chris raised earlier on about succession and passing money intergenerationally. So there's a lot of ways of doing this. There's a lot of ways of structuring your investments and pensions in such a way as to benefit from the tax system here. It's like, it's, and I think you said it earlier on, I think for people moving to Portugal or who already are here, you basically have to think Portuguese. You've come to enjoy the lifestyle, enjoy the country. You have to invest and manage your finances as Portuguese citizens do and as Portuguese residents do. So we can certainly assist in
David,
some of those.
One of the things that normally the clients ask when they are coming to the end of the NHR is how can they reduce their tax liability?
Yeah.
And a lot of people like yourself, normally they know that there are tax efficient products where you can pay something as little as 11.2% tax.
Yes,
so
exactly.
this is available for anyone that is resident in Portugal. So in case you have the NHR, what you need to do is speak with an IFA, someone like David, to help you to restructure your investments. So in a way that you're going to be on this tax bracket of 11.2%. And that refers, for instance, for life assurance policies where your capital is invested for at least 8 years and 1 day. So, and you are only taxed on the gain at 11.2%, not on the whole amount that you redeem. I mean, these kind of financial structures, they are available for anyone. So anyone moving to Portugal now, they could take advantage of those, even if they don't have the NHR. So they just need to plan and perhaps restructure their investments, their pensions, etc., before becoming a resident, so that they are not hit with a high tax rate when redeeming those amounts, but only after the 8 years and 1 day. And I'm sure that you can assist them on managing those.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Ricardo.
Can I just say that's exactly what we've done.
Yeah, just going back to the chat.
Can I just say that's exactly what we've done for our family? I would say that is exactly what we have done for our family in Portugal. They've purchased property. They've bought invested into the life insurance structures, and they are now, planning for their post NHR.
So Chris, would that be fair to say, if people plan it and structure it right, the feedback I've heard is that if you structure it right in those first 3 or 4 years of NHR, you can secure your and optimize your tax and wealth position for 20 years or more?
Yes, Paul. From our point of view, it's the maths was really quite simple, because we worked and planned right from the beginning. We had the moment where you've got 10 years worth of NHR. You got, as Ricardo said, you got to hold the structure for 8 years and 1 day. So effectively, if you do your planning within the first 2 years, even after NHR ends, you're in a very, very good tax efficient environment. Now, again, I would always say, as David said, it's about being Portuguese, and this is what wealthy Portuguese people do.
Yeah, I just imagine there's a few people that come unstuck by not planning when they go into NHR.
The vital bit is to plan early. Yeah, the vital bit is to plan early. But, it's never too late to start a good plan.
And on starting a good plan, Mary Harper has asked within the chat, and I'll put this on to you, David. What is the best way to structure my passive income from my UK pension and dividends? Mary lives in Portugal, and she's just about to get her NHR ahead of the upcoming deadline.
I think everyone's situation is different, of course, and actually you need to work out what income you require, what dividends you require to live off. That's obviously the most important thing. Work out what you want to have in the first place from income, and then accumulate and save through something that the investment program that Ricardo there outlined does give you. As you say, if those monies have been after 8 years and 1 day, you can afford yourself a very good and efficient tax income, taxable 11.2% on the gain on the withdrawals of what you take out. So it's very much structuring per individual, but there are sufficient. Obviously, you need to take enough dividends and income to support lifestyle and do the things you want to do. But to save and accumulate in the sort of Portuguese compliant structures and investments is very much the best way. Obviously, have to look at each situation on its own, but absolutely possible in what Mary there says.
Okay, brilliant. Ricardo, back to you. There's an earlier question from Noah Hardy. Noah was saying that he's got NHR status, but he was told by a friend who was on 8 years into their NHR and he got a nasty shot that they were going to pay 48% tax on day one in year 11. And he's left it too late. Noah's on 2 years into his NHR. What can he do to plan for the long term in terms of assets, income, and tax planning?
So it's not necessarily 48%. Okay, if he's taxed at the progressive tax rates, it's correct that the highest tax band is 48% for income up to 78,000 euros roughly, but the 48% makes an average of 37, and only the income above those 78,000 is taxed at 48. What he needs to do, he needs to speak with an IFA and see if there are different ways of structuring their pensions. It's also important that people realize that if you have a self-invested pension, something that you made your own contributions, so it's not one of those pensions that it was your employment and your employer that paid for it. It is those that you set up yourself, and most of the people, wealthy people, will have pensions like this. In Portugal, the law says that you are only taxed on 15% of these pensions, and that's nothing to do with the NHR. So it's on the law. So if you are taking, let's say, you have a SIP and you are taking 100,000 euros a year, you only pay tax on 15,000. So the 15,000 is the element that is going to be taxed at the progressive tax rates. So in other words, if you were paying 10% tax on this pension or annuity, the 10% would be effectively 1.5%, because it's 10% over 15%. And what this means, it means that after the 10 years, you're going to be paying progressive tax rates on the 15% and not on the whole amount of the pension that you receive. I mean, there are a lot of things that you need to consider while you are NHR, and to plan for the period after the NHR. But there are also you also need to consider that before joining, because if you can't get the NHR, there are still a lot of tax breaks in Portugal that are important when compared with many other destinations. I mean, there's no inheritance tax in Portugal, there's no wealth tax in Portugal, there's no gift tax. There are a lot of advantages still. And when people talk about the 48% band, they got scared. But then if you do the calculations, it's not exactly like that. I have clients that pay 10% tax, and if I choose to tax them at the progressive tax rates, they pay even less than 10%, because if you have a small pension, perhaps the 10%, it's not even the lowest you can pay, because the 10%, there's no tax deductions. But if you choose to be taxed at the progressive tax rates, there will be tax deductions which are based on those invoices that you ask. And that's why everywhere you go in Portugal, people ask, do you want the factura with your fiscal number? Those facturas will be, depending on the sector of activity, could potentially be a tax deduction. And obviously, if you are earning 30 or 40,000 euros a year on a private pension, obviously you prefer to be taxed at 10% autonomous rate. But if you are to be taxed at the progressive tax rates, or if you have a lower pension, perhaps that is more intelligent. In that case, those deductions will also apply. So it means that you will pay eventually less than the 10%. So there are a lot of things that you need to consider, and each case is different.
David, have you got anything to add on that one?
That was a really good summary, and that's exactly the understanding of it. And I think that and Ricardo has actually set it out exactly correctly. There is, don't be scared. Work within the systems that are in place, and to look at what you have. Obviously, government schemes are different and not treated differently. But it's where the assets come from in the first place, and actually look at the systems that are involved there. There are a number of different planning tools as well that one can use, which we won't go into detail now because we'd be sitting here till sort of 1:30. But certainly in terms of what Ricardo there says, 100% agree with that. It's look at what's right for each person and each person's individual situation. and things as Ricardo also mentions, things like wealth tax, inheritance tax are key considerations going forward in an individual's planning, and those and think that was absolute.
So David,
summary.
no, sorry.
Can I just Steve?
Okay,
So
I was just going to say, Dave.
I was going to ask because there's a lot of people asking.
Yeah, go on, Ricardo.
Sorry, there's people asking about what's going to replace the NHR, and I just wanted to have just 1 minute on that. So the NHR, we don't know what's going to be replaced, but on the bill, on the state budget proposal that the government has filed and that will be voted at the end of the month, there are two regimes that could be of interest. One of them, it states that anyone that was not resident over the last 5 years can be on this tax program, which is going to be replacing what we used to be called the regressar program, which means return. So it means that anyone that goes into this program, they will have a 50% discount on the tax rate applicable to their employment or self-employment. Okay, so anyone that are not able to apply for the NHR because it becomes a resident after 2023. So in 2024, they will still be allowed to get to this return program and get a 50% discount, in this case, on the tax just on employment or self-employment. There's a cap of 250,000 euros of income, but there might be people interested on this. And then they have what they called this incentive for scientific research, and that incentive, basically, if they have an eligible occupation, their self-employment or employment income will be taxed at a flat rate of 20%. And this is, again, for 5 years. So both of these regimes are mainly for those people that are working, either have income from employment or self-employment, and they are limited in time for 5 years compared with the NHR. And the NHR, as we know, also is a very good element in terms of the taxation of passive income. So these two regimes don't cover that. So it means that your interest, your capital income, and your pensions will not be included on these tax breaks. Okay.
Okay. Just further on the ITS, which is proposed to come in. Spencer Maynard has asked, does ITS work out more tax efficient for many? As didn't the draft say that you get 0% tax on the first 250,000 euros of annual income and progressive rates on the next 150,000 euros per year? And he's asking, obviously, he's based in the States. If so, what does that mean for US citizens?
It's only for employment or self-employment income. So it's not for pension, it's not for distributions, it's not for dividends. And it's not that they get the 250 allowance. What they get is they get 50% discount on the tax rate with a cap of 250,000 euros. Okay.
Thank you for clearing that up.
Steve, I was going to say earlier, when Ricardo was talking and explaining and then it said that you need to go to an IFA. So in terms of the IFAs, because obviously this came up a lot in the research of people knowing who to go to for the right thing, was they need to go to a regulated IFA. Is that right, David? That's in Portugal. Could you explain a little bit about what the difference is between what you guys do and Ricardo and the law firms?
I mean, we very much work with companies like AFM and Ricardo and his team. From our perspective, what you want to do, what we would obviously recommend, and I think from a regulatory perspective, what you need to do is work with internationally regulated advisors who are based not necessarily based in the country, although we are in the countries that you're looking to move to. that way, we have, as I say, a team of like-minded advisors. From a regulatory point of view as well, many, take the UK as an example, post-Brexit, there are lots of very good advisors in the UK who are very good at advising in clients in the UK, but they are not now allowed to advise people who are outside of the UK and in Portugal in this situation. So there is a limit to what they can advise. One of our jobs is often to work with their previous advisors or previous investment managers, who they may be happy with, to ensure that they are Portuguese tax compliant, but obviously, we're still working in relation to their UK advisors in this, or even in the US as well. So it's very much working with people, but you need advice from people regulated and qualified in the countries that you're going to, and obviously that's what we would suggest in Portugal, because you need to use experts in the Portuguese field.
Brilliant, thank you, Dave. Well, we've got so many questions.
Can I jump in there?
Yeah, certainly, Chris.
Okay, so sorry, yeah. What I'd say is what we've done is it's very much a team. You have your legal advice, you have your tax advice, and you have your financial advice, and it's very much a team effort. That's the way it should work. They should all work together, work in harmony, and make sure that they all know goal is at the end of it. And it's also important to work with people that are used to dealing with wealth. A really important thing. We find it in our sphere, sometimes numbers frighten people. But you need to be working with people that are used to dealing with, people that have reasonable amounts of wealth.
Can I just jump on one, Steve? This question here from a Laurent that came in just this second. Laurent, the answer, which is about the life insurance contract route under the PIT, saying, does it have to be a Portuguese company or can it be Luxembourg, etc.? The answer is, Laurent, it would generally be Luxembourg or Dublin-based companies that we would work with. And there are different reasons for using those. And obviously, if you want some more information, we can get that to you. I just saw that pop in at the end there, so I thought I would deal with that straight away.
Okay, Dave, thank you. I said we've got so many questions coming in that we are going to go a little bit past the half hour. So one here from Hugo. So Hugo is saying that he is a NHR tax resident himself, and his parents who are looking to be on the NHR before the deadline, can they use his Portuguese address to apply for the NHR?
If they are EU citizens, yes. In most cases, what they need to do is they need to go to the local parish, the Junta de Freguesia, and they need to get an attestation, which normally it's witnessed by two people, stating that they live in that address. And that attestation will replace the rental contract or the deeds of the contract, or of the deeds of the property. So when they go to the local council, they will bring with them the passport, the NIF, and these attestation that they got previously at the junta.
And Ricardo, on that, so if you're a husband, if you've got NHR but your wife hasn't, what does that, what's the process for those people?
It depends if that people is a EU citizen or not, non-EU. If he's a EU citizen, the process is the same. So it goes to the town hall to get the EU resident certificate, what they call the CRUI. And to do this, in most cases, it's only the NIF, the passport, and the property rental, the contract for the rental contract, or the property deeds. In the case that she is married with someone that's already living there and the property is not in her name, she goes to the local junta, the freguesia, and gets an attestation, a witness attestation, a certificate to say that she lives in that address, and that attestation replaces the rental contract. If she's a non-EU citizen and she's married with someone that is already resident, she needs to apply at SEF in Portugal. SEF is the immigration office, needs to apply for family reunification, okay? And she needs to bring all the evidence that she's married with someone that is already a resident. Again, I'm unsure if there will be enough time to do it, but they will need to get the appointment with SEF before the end of the year, okay?
And that's based on additional advice you got yesterday.
Okay.
That came through yesterday.
Yes, I mean the advice that we got yesterday was that we spoke with the tax authorities. We have many cases here of people that are in different phases of the process, and we tried to register someone that had already gone through the first stage with the VFS in the States, where they already had the appointment there, and they are waiting now to get an appointment with SEF. And the tax authorities clearly stated that they will not accept to change their tax status until the moment that they have an authorization or a residency permit. And that's normally issued only after the meeting with the immigration office, the SEF in Portugal. And we also had situations where we can confirm that the people already had the meeting with SEF in Portugal, and they are waiting on their residency cards. But because they already had the meeting, the tax authorities accepted that we change the address and make them tax residents based on that meeting that they had with SEF. So we think that at the moment, we just need to hope that the government implement some sort of transitionary period for those that already started the process and are not able to meet with SEF because there's not enough appointments available.
I spoke to several law firms yesterday who indicated that, you know, the investment in services like yourselves or legal services on the visa side, it's a balance of risk in terms of, you know, if you believe that you're going to save a lot of money through advice and you've got the time and you've got the money to actually do it, then it's a balance of risk, because over 10 years, if it's cost you 5,000 or 6,000 to go through the process, or maybe even a bit more, that's still only 500, 600 euros a year. If that then is then applied to your tax and your wealth and how you structure it, it's not a major investment. I'm just interested to see what the others have to say on that, maybe.
I think, like it's as we said on all of these things, it's building your life, and it's not just a, let's call it, it's not a tax play. It has to be a lifestyle, and people are moving for the lifestyle as much as anything else. Portugal before NHR was still a wonderful place to live and invest in and work in for people, and NHR was kind of put that on a little bit on steroids, shall we say. But actually, it will still be an amazing place in come 1st of April next year, and it'll still be a lovely place to live. So I think it is look for the long term and be in the right country for you. So that would
structure it, like you said. Make sure you get the right planning and structure.
Yeah. Plan.
We have gone over slightly. I'm really keen to sort of get some takeaways from all of you guys. So I'll just say to the audience, obviously we've got over 100 questions. We haven't been able to get around to answering all of them. We will do our best to contact all of you guys and get those questions answered. I said there is the ability to book an appointment. The button is on the screen, so please utilize that. As I said, we've sort of towards the end of the webinar. Hopefully we haven't got too far over our allotted time. I want to thank obviously the audience for their engagement, and I want to thank the panelists as well for their valuable insight. It's been obviously a highly engaging session. One final question from me, and this is obviously a little bit of a subjective one, but given the Portuguese government has announced the closing date of the NHR applications, which is the 31st of December, what do you feel that is the final date that professional advisors are taking on new clients? And I know that's going to differ from advisor to advisor, but what's the feeling with regards to that in terms of a final date or a date where you really need to be, have your ducks in a row in order to engage an advisor? David?
Great question. Almost impossible to answer.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
I would say Ricardo would give you an answer on dates in terms of applying for NHR and residency. From our point of view, I would always say and this is almost sort of out of the manual for financial planning, is that the earlier you start to plan, the better it actually is. And even thinking about these things is very important. So from my end, we would always say the earlier you start to plan and consider things, the better.
Brilliant. Okay, Ricardo?
I was on mute. I mean, the sooner the better, because like I was saying before, all these companies that deal with the NHR applications and visa processes, they are getting flooded by new requests because everybody wants to move now. So the sooner you do it, the better, because there will come a point where it will be not possible to process all the applications. But what people need to understand is that it's still possible, and we still hope that there will be a transitionary period for those that apply before the end of the year. The ones at the first meeting with the VSF to get the visa before the end of the year. So there's nothing in stone. I mean, it's better to try and risk that than to not do anything, and then suddenly the government says that it is possible for those that started the process before the end of the year, and you realize that you didn't start the process. So my advice is to do it ASAP.
You've got to be in it to win it. So even if there's a transition period, if you're not in there, then you can't endanger yourself to the success of making the deadline or any extended deadline.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to wrap up, I'm going to ask each of you individually just to leave the audience with one sort of takeaway from today's discussion. So I'm going to start with you,
I think go back to the what came out of the research, that basically Portugal, live like a local, embrace it. 73% of people that were interviewed said they wished they'd embraced and acted more like a local earlier, and then they would have taken more from it. And the other big stat is that people already on NHR, only 27% of them have actually planned and structured for the long term. So talk to people like David and make sure that you're structured and planned for the future.
Okay, thank you for that, Paul. Chris, what's your takeaway?
I think my takeaway from the whole discussions and everything is that there's a lot of panic and worry and concern and very kind of visa-based advice. All I'd say to people is, make sure it's the place you want to be. Portugal's a wonderful, wonderful facilities, wonderful people, wonderful beaches, wonderful climate. The tax part of it should only be one part of what you do. And I see people chat saying, I could save as much as £100,000 worth of tax, because of that. Well, do you know what? If you live in the right, you pay the tax that is payable in that place, however you plan. But the key to it is know why you want to be there. We work with very wealthy people. We work and provide opportunities for them, and they'll live in places with high taxation if it's the right place to live. The key to it is actually planning it so you don't pay all that high taxation. And that goes back to something I heard David say earlier, plan. And it is dealing with the right people to get the right out to you and your family. And we have to say, we look around the world. We look around the world, and Portugal came up as one of the top 3 places that our family wanted to spend time and live.
That's great. Thank you, Chris. Ricardo, last word from yourself?
Just want to say thank you for the invitation, and apologize to all of those that we were not able to answer all the questions. But yeah. But please try to contact us, and we will try to answer as much as we can. Okay.
And I'm going to leave the final word to you, David.
I'd reiterate what Ricardo said there, having seen all these questions coming through. So apologies if there's something specifically we didn't get to. Maybe what we're trying to do is pull something together so that we can forward that to some of the attendees, so that there's we can send out some details, and more than happy to do that. Thank you very much for all the attendance. Hopefully it was very useful. And I say a big takeaway really is to think long term, and to think about the ways you should be planning. It's not a 5-minute decision. It is a long-term decision, and in a wonderful country. So I think that's all I would say.
Brilliant. Well, thank you. Thank you guys. The insight and your time has been really appreciated. It just leaves me to say that a watch back recording of the webinar, along with a copy of the Wealthy Expats in Portugal report, will be sent to everybody within the next 24 hours. Again, thank you to the panelists, and thank you to the audience. Don't forget that our next webinar is on the 7th of November, all around the NHR, would you believe it or not. And again, if you want to stay updated, please check out our events section and go to our website, which is www.portugalpathways.io. So just leave me to say thank you very much. Goodbye, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.